Rocken Larry Locken here on the Pleiadian Light Grid Project, an affiliate of Pleiadian Express Productions Network. Hey, I wanted to talk to everybody today a little bit about, well, something that I was interested kind of in the past growing up, shortwave radio number stations. These number stations, for those of you who don't know, were very prevalent on shortwave radio from about the end of World War II, starting into the age of the Cold War, which was the late 1940s. And most of these stations ran up until the early 2000s. A lot of them aren't there anymore, plus shortwave radio doesn't have the reception that it used to be with satellites, drones, and all the cell towers and whatnot in the sky. But there's a lot of dispute, and has been a lot of dispute for years on what these number stations were. Like the one you just heard, the one that, plagued some of my late nights growing up as a kid in the pre-internet days of the 80s, 39715. Or you'd get a station that would be like Delta, 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 Echo, Echo, Tango, Tango. And I just assumed that probably some of those were for military purposes when I was growing up. But a lot of them, I know my best friend and I used to mock and laugh at them, and some of them would kind of creep us out. And I happened to, a few weeks ago, I guess it's been about a month now, stumble upon one of them on YouTube looking for something else. I stumbled upon an old recording of a station that I had picked up when I was a kid on the shortwave radio. It's thought that these were used for spy and espionage purposes by using a one-time encrypted, unbreakable key code. For instance, somebody anywhere in the world could be told to tune into the station at a certain time, the frequency. And back then, AM, FM shortwave radios were fairly common, so it's like, nobody would think anything of it if you had one on. And you would know what time was your time and what day was your day to listen in and get those codes, right? Those one-time encrypted codes. And it would change all the time, so there was really no way of breaking them even till this day. And also what it did too was if you had, say, an agent in the field or a spy that you were just contracting out that you really weren't sure you could trust, well, then no harm, no foul. I mean, you give them the one-time encrypted codes and that's it, and either they carry through their mission or they don't. But, for instance, it wouldn't be like tracking or tracing an IP address like they can do today over the internet. There was no way to track these. So even if you were, say, a spy for the Western countries, if you were a U.S. or a British spy deep inside the Iron Curtain, if you were in East Germany or somewhere where, you might be in East Germany as a spy, you might go out for the day or whatever, and the landlady or whatever might come into your room and snoop around or whatever. Well, there'd be no big deal or no issue with having, a shortwave AM, FM shortwave radio, no biggie. And a lot of times these codes, these keypad codes that the spy may have would be on the back of a matchbook, inside of a bar of soap on the label. That would be when trying to sneak them into the more stringent countries of the time, such as, East Germany and such as Russia or anywhere, the Soviet Union or anywhere deep inside the Iron Curtain. Whereas coming in the United States, you might actually have a book that gives all the different codes and what a certain series of numbers mean as far as a letter, and to watch for a certain number change during these sequences. That's just one example that they have given for these number codes and what they were. The governments of the world still don't like to talk about them, or they just, brush them off as, it was just a military operation or something back in the day. Now, another reason why these number stations were also used was to keep that frequency open 24/7 in case there was a nuclear war and no other communication could be used on the planet except for shortwave radio transmissions, and that's still true to this day. An analog transmission would work, possibly a digital one would not so much. Okay, so that's the thing. And a lot of these shortwave radio stations too would, I know that that's what they were particular for. A lot of them would play. I would never find any good rock and roll music or anything like that over the shortwave radio stations. I would hear some tacky, lame music like you were in Cabana in the tropics in the mid 50s, some kind of music like Come Mr. Tallyman, tally me a banana, only with just the music to it, or some gaudy stuff like that, right? So it'd be that or some boring talk. But these number stations, the thing about them is they would go 24/7, constant, nonstop, most of them. And the few that didn't would have a certain set time every day, every hour, maybe sometimes even on the hour, where they would play these codes, these encrypted codes and messages to somebody. So, of course, they were used for spying espionage, that's one. They were also used for keeping that frequency open so nobody could get on it or jam it, keeping that frequency open 24/7 in case we had a nuclear attack. Um, some of the other reasons that come to my mind why they may been used to in the research that I've done is in certain regions of the world, I think they were done for mind control. Back in the day when shortwave radio was more popular and stronger, certainly over in Eastern Europe, I'm sure, and even into the United States or in places like Cuba and little remote setups here in the United States, where you could have a transmitter out in the middle of nowhere somewhere, and then somebody, I don't know, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 miles away, transmitting to that transmitter to bump it wherever. Okay, so mind control techniques. I get that vibe out of a lot of the East German and Soviet sounding shortwave radio number stations that I had listened to and picked up, and different tones. Like for instance, I'll play you a little clip of what one of them sounded like here. This is from East Germany during the Cold War. It ran from the early 1950s clear until around 2000. But here it is. That one's a little hard to hear, I know, but that one was believed to have been used by the Stasi, which was the East German secret police. East Germany was a very paranoid society. When you think about the stereotypes that an American may have about how it was behind the Iron Curtain with Russia, the real place where that was really true was East Germany, where you had a society where not only the secret police, but you had one in every 50 citizens that were just, they were paid and they were used to snitch on people that might talk bad about the government or listen through very thin apartment walls where you might hear a neighbor talking ill of the East German government and the Soviet Union, or communism in general, and they would be turned in and reported to secret police. Well, and my take on that too is, not to get off track, my take is there's something about that East German society the way it was. I really feel like it was not only a Nazi holdover of Nazi mindsets that fled there, as well as the Soviet influence. Of course, you had the mixture of the most evil, maniacal minds that were in the KGB, as well as the most maniacal hardliners from the Nazi Party that came up with that system. I do believe. I've never heard that before. I've never looked into it. I don't know. That's just a feeling I get. So, too, some of these shortwave radio stations would be used for deception purposes. I was actually, I saw his message on a couple of the shortwave radio YouTube posts, and I messaged him and talked with him for a bit because he had mentioned that when he was growing up in the late 70s, his dad was stationed over in Germany, in the United States Army, and they were about 11 miles from the East German border, and he would pick up these stations at night that were completely American sounding in voice. I mean, the voice would be American sounding, but after he listened to him for a while, he started to realize that, okay, well, this is kind of odd. He couldn't put his finger on it, but they weren't using any American slang, right? They weren't using any of the American slang lingo that any American would know and use from time to time. It was just a very no American colloquialisms, just completely an American accent, but it didn't feel right. And then, of course, they would start in. He said he knew it was odd when they'd come across and tell people, don't bother watching baseball or football this weekend because all your NFL teams or Major League Baseball teams have gone bankrupt and the league has been shut down and canceled. Just things of that nature that were I'm sure coming out of Russia or East Germany. Russia had, of course, Radio Moscow that they broadcasted with an American type voice, on there. And of course, I'm sure we blasted with Voice of America things into Russia as well. I know the Russians would jam our signals by playing. What they would do is they would take a song, play it backwards, and then take another song and play it backwards, and then overlay the two tracks. And that's how they would use that to jam radio signals coming into Russia during the Cold War from, say Western opposition, whether it was, the British or the USA, or whatnot, Germany, West Germany. So anyway, back to the uses for the number stations. Okay, so espionage, spying, keeping open in case of a world emergency. Also in mind control, we talked about the mind control with the numbers. Also, and this may be a little bit of a stretch, but also I feel like they were also, some of them were extraterrestrial contact to us, whether they were signals that were encapsulated and sent through time, whether they were given to us in real time. I really feel like some of those are the case, and that some of us starseeds in the 80s were maybe drawn to hearing a little bit of it and getting some activation codes. I truly believe, like the first one I just played for you, the Lincolnshire poacher, that they never could figure out where it was coming from. The British, they traced it to there was this tower in Cyprus somewhere, and it was all broke down, and there was nothing, there was nothing or nobody that could transmit within hundreds of miles of it. So, or that they thought anyway. So I'm thinking in the tone in it, I'm thinking it's almost a starseed activation code, but I'm probably just wishing upon a star with that. But I just remember late at night, growing up in the 80s and the pre-internet days, of course, along with surfing the AM radio here on the Oregon coast to see if I could, how far out east I could pick up. If I could pick up somewhere like West Texas in the middle of the night, or into the Rocky Mountains, or up into Canada, stations out of Calgary, Vancouver, even Edmonton on a really, really clear night. But of course, all up and down the west coast of the USA, you could pick them up. It's not so much that way anymore, because like with shortwave radio, AM is kind of going by the wayside, as well as, like I mentioned, so many drones and satellites in the sky and whatnot, cell towers. It's kind of, it's phasing that out. But back then, on a clear night, it seems like you could hear forever on there. And of course, it was the pre-internet days, so that's what I would do late at night from about 8 till 13, 14 years old, and a little bit after that. But I would do that, and I would also get on the shortwave radio to see if I could find out anything interesting. And once in a while, I'd come across the number stations nightly, but once in a while I'd stay on one for a bit and listen, just wondering what it was and what the hell the purpose of it was. And my mind wasn't satisfied just with that it was basic military or basic, codes to a boat out at sea. It was just too often, too frequent, too in-depth, too complex to be something just that simple. The Tango, Tango, X-ray, X-ray, X-ray ones, yeah, I could buy that, but the number stations were really strange, and some of them would really be creepy too. Some of them would kind of creep me out. They would have a lady with a German or Russian accent, or wherever they were from, yelling or scream, sounding like what appeared to be being tortured, or yelled or screamed, followed by numbers giving, tones given, parts of songs being sung and mixed together. So I think a lot of those were used for mind control. But there's a YouTube link called the Conant Project that talks a little bit about these number stations in depth. For instance, I know that there's a scene in Vanilla Sky, which Vanilla Sky is really a trippy movie. And I got a weird vibe from it, like a cool weird vibe from it when I remember seeing the previews to it when it was coming out. Um, it's not typically a movie that Tom Cruise, especially Cameron Diaz, do. Even some of the lingo that they use in there is just kind of odd. I remember one scene where Cameron Diaz was telling Tom Cruise that they were arguing in the car, and she's like, well, you came in my mouth. That gives me the right now to know what you're up to, or it was something like that, but totally like out of character. And there was a scene too in the movie where he's thinking back, or he's thinking into this other timeline, and it has some numbers faintly playing in the background, fading out to the squelch and the MK12 Ultra kind of mind control sounding squelch in the background. If you've seen the movie and have seen that scene I'm talking about, you know what I mean, and you've heard that, but you may have just heard that in passing because you were more focused on the movie, which anybody would be. Also, of course, in the game Black Ops 1, and I only know this because my son is ranked in the top 50 in the world at playing Black Ops Call of Duty. I'm not a big fan of it, but whatever, he's responsible with the game. Anyway, so of course, in the first Black Ops, there is this one part they keep saying the numbers, Mason. What do the numbers mean? And they're talking about, of course, these number stations that give all these codes out. So, they're not really used a lot anymore, because of shortwave radio not being that effective. But what I found funny was this is really, really wild, you guys. About 2 weeks ago, well, and for the couple weeks before that, I kept thinking to myself, why in the hell, in all the years I've listened to Coast, both with Art Bell, clear back to 1989, off and on when it started, and George Norrie, and all the other shows like that, why have I never, ever, ever heard them do a show or heard about them doing a show on these fucking number stations? Okay, so I was thinking about it, just about ready, seriously, to either Skype or message Art Bell and ask him why they haven't done it, or message Coast to Coast as well and see why, if they ever have, and why they never have done it. And then lo and behold, one night I was on YouTube just searching through some things, and this was just last week, and I came across a 5-minute segment from Art Bell's new show, Midnight in the Desert, a 5-minute segment where he talks about these number stations and gives this big build up and plays this recording that was picked up supposedly from U.S. Air Strategic Command, right? And I didn't really make much of it. Art Bell kind of exaggerated a bit and said how creepy it was and weird. And of course, I think his mindset was just going back to the old number stations that he remembers like I do. But this one was kind of generic. It gave some numbers, and then it was basically the Yankee Foxtrot Tango Tango Echo Delta 1 1. What he was really hung up on was there was a part in the beginning where it said mission has started or something like that. And Art kind of has a tendency to over dramatize things, whether that's just his nature or if it's just something he tries to do I mean, it's worked well for him. Obviously, he's the pioneer and of all this that we know and do as far as this realm goes, and he'll always be that. So it was just kind of ironic that he had that on there about the number stations. When here I've been thinking about him lately. I've been having those kind of synchronicities, I'm sure, like we all have, for sure. So it's one of those things where it's not really something anybody needs to be tripped out about nowadays or really dwell on or give a lot of thought to. But That's why I've been, talking about him a lot lately on Facebook, and also why, of course, it is a hoax. I got to come clean. I mean, a lot of people know this, but I still post it to have fun with people. On the eve of the blood moon, my best friend, my lifetime best friend Scotty, and I were over, he was over at my house, and we had a couple beers, and we were remembering those, I was reminding him of those number stations, and he was laughing, and we were mocking it, and we got this idea to do this YouTube taping called Mysterious Shortwave Radio Broadcast on the eve of the blood moon, and we did it, and it taped, and it was only 49 seconds long, right? And then we were thinking about it for a couple hours, and we decided to do a second one. We had brainstormed, like, we spent 2 hours brainstorming on the idea to do this second one, and we taped the second one, and we did that one with a purpose. Of course, the numbers in that second transmission correspond alphabetically to the phrase "get along." Right? The numbers that he kept repeating corresponded to "get along." I mean, we tried to come up with other ideas, something in reference to a Jewish holiday, or something in reference to the end of the world, and we didn't want to do that, because not just because it'd be kind of dark, but just because all that shit's been kind of done before. So we decided to use the term "get along," and he corresponded it alphanumerically. And the hot thing about it was, right, I was editing it a little bit and putting the thumbnail on it, and it was 49 seconds long, which was the same amount of time the first one was. We didn't plan that out. I mean, how could you plan it out to the second? But we didn't plan that out, and it was just crazy that they both ended up at 49 seconds, and the second one had a good message to it, "get along." The first one is just kind of comical and funny, yet I feel like consciously, through me and through him, I feel like that it was like the right thing to do, if that makes sense. I feel like the lovingness towards humanity through those was good enough. And of course, it was funny watching. There was a few people with the second one that spent, I'd say 5 or 6 people spent a couple hours trying to crack it, and they came back and they had cracked it, and say, "Hey, that corresponds to get along." And I'm like, wow, these are super intelligent beings. But the videos are on the Pleiadian Light Grid Project YouTube channel, not Pleiadian Express Productions, but our other one, Pleiadian Light Grid Project. And I have them in a playlist too. It's called Mysterious Shortwave Radio Transmission on the Eve of the Blood Moon. Right, and there's the first one, and then the second one's a little more serious sounding. We had debated. I had wanted him to use a certain tone, where he changed the tone in every number that he spoke all the way through, and then he wanted to do it in a complete robot voice. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to, instead of going through the numbers twice, you're going to go through them 3 times. You're going to start off with the robot sound, then on the second run through, do the change in your voice with every letter or every number, and then go one more time through with the numbers, using your robot sounding voice. So we did it, and it turned out to be exactly 49 seconds. And anyway, I just wanted to kind of share with people out there, something from my past that I thought was kind of funny, and always intrigued me was these number stations, right? And I realized what they're all used for: MK Ultra, mind control, spy espionage, keeping those frequencies open. And I believe ET Contactee came through shortwave radios too, to people with activations. And some of it was probably in present time, and some of it was probably from Atlantis and Lemuria. You just never know. It was a wide open thing with, shortwave radios, because you could reach the span of thousands of miles, and there was really no way to detect, who was listening and whatnot. It was just one of them things. But I really thank everybody for listening, and that's my spill on these number stations. If anybody has any feedback, I'd be glad to hear it and love to hear it. And, aside from, I mean, if they want to comment with the MK Ultra and the, mind control and all that, that's fine. And the ET Con, I get all that and all that. But if they have anything to expand upon that theory, or to any history, any stories that they can relate, or want to reminisce or share any stories about hearing it in the past, something a little bit more than what I'm already saying or telling everybody out there. Again, like I said, I'd mentioned it was funny, The the gentleman that was who was stationed in West Germany with his family in the 70s, hearing those obviously Russian and German spy broadcast, East German spy broadcasts that would sound American but have no slang tone in their voice, no slang words, and say things like, "Oh, your favorite teams won't be playing this weekend as the NFL's gone bankrupt. Don't bother watching." And you might not, you might hear that and not know for a day or two, be like, what, really? Because, the internet wasn't really around over there. And, you'd probably have to call back to the States to have that verified or whatnot if you were worried about it. But that's just kind of the funny, humorous mind control games that we played with each other during the Cold War. And I got to admit that the East did it well. So, and also, of course, it goes back to one other story I want to share before I let everybody go was I was watching the movie Pearl Harbor years ago. It was on TV. It was about 10 years ago. Just watching it, and there was a scene, just a quick scene it cut to, with up in Alaska with some U.S. naval, personnel, some sailors in their barracks at night, and they had on the radio Tokyo Rose, which Tokyo Rose was out of Japan, but she was a complete American sounding voice, maybe a little bit of a Japanese accent, but mostly American. And in a sultry voice, she would talk about how, oh, you strong, big, good-looking American boys are so tough, but you're no match for my Japanese boys and our Nazi soldiers. You're no match. They're going to hurt you and tear you limb from limb. And the one guy in the scene, you could hear the sailor going, "Somebody shut that bitch up." Well, the funny thing is this wasn't 2 days later. I was over talking to my grandfather before he passed away, about a year before he passed away. And we were talking about World War II because he was stationed up in Alaska in the Aleutian Islands during the war and the Navy. And I started talking to him about, what they would do at night when in the barracks when it was cold. He said they'd play cards, tune on the radio, try to get something on the radio. I said, "Did you ever find anything?" He said, nothing but that Tokyo Rose." And I had to laugh, and he started describing to me that, yeah, I'd get all the guys incited and pissed off and really mad, and and it just goes to show you all that it did, all that mind game did that they tried to pull. All it did was piss a bunch of U.S. military off, and made them that much more aggressive and wanting to take down, the other side. So I thought that was kind of funny that he'd reminisced about hearing her late at night and some of the psychology that she would pull and all of that. And of course, she actually came to America after the war and ended up owning a shopping mall or something in Chicago till she died in the 80s. But that's America for you. So I just wanted to wish out everybody out there much love. Um, Stay safe, be cool. The Pleiadians love you. Just hey, hang in there. If you want to find out more about me or um, check out, what I do, you can go to several places. You can go to, of course, my timeline, Larry Locken on Facebook. You can go to, okay, there's so many pages and groups, but Fringe Thinkers, Pleiadians Plus Attitude, the great Leah Shapiro's Pleiadians group, just the word Pleiadians. You can go to my YouTube uh, and Google Plus channels, Pleiadian Light Grid Project, as well as the big mothership one, Pleiadian Express Productions. And of course, we have Facebook pages for both of those too. So, that's where you can find me, and as well as over 30 regional groups, specialized Pleiadian groups like Lyran Kingdom, Pleiadian Lyran Kingdom, Pleiadian Reiki Healers and Masters, Pleiadian, Twin Flame Souls United. And just like I said, too many to mention, and a plethora of pages where you can really go to find out all this information. I should have just said this before rambling on. There is a page called Pleiadian Groups and Pages. It's just called Pleiadian Groups and Pages. Now there's a group one too called Index, but if you want just the ones that I'm involved with or that I created, go to the page Pleiadian Groups and Pages. And with that being said, I just wanted to wish everybody a big cosmic dating cane kiss. Namaste and much love. Peace.